Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was originally released on May 26, 1967. It was the Beatles' eighth studio album. In 1968, it won 4 Grammy Awards and was the first rock album to ever win Album of the Year. The story is well known that the original inspiration for the album came from an idea by Paul McCartney for a song about a military marching band, and that this idea evolved into the idea of adopting the name of the band as an alter ego for the Beatles, and that the entire album would be a performance by this fictional band, and that said alter ego would free them from any preconceived notions of what a Beatles album would, could, and should be. At this point, the Beatles had retired from touring permanently, so the knowledge that they wouldn't have to perform any of the album's material live also led to a feeling that they could experiment freely in the studio with different instrumentation and arrangements that would have been impossible for them to replicate live with just the 4 of them. The Beatles had already been moving towards more experimentation with their last 2 albums, Rubber Soul and Revolver, and they were finding it harder and harder to replicate their new songs with just the 4-piece combo. In addition, they were tired of touring and tired of performing for audiences who screamed and made it mostly impossible to hear themselves perform. I have often thought that if the Beatles had not been able to quit touring, that it would have had a limiting and thus negative effect on their creative output. So I think it's important to note that without that, we might never have gotten the studio masterpieces like Sgt. Pepper, The White Album, Abbey Road, and so on. Now, as far as I know, this is the first time that I have heard of a well-known music artist adopting an alter ego. As successful as the concept was, I can think of no other bands or artists adopting the concept themselves till only very recently. Today's pop stars use the concept quite frequently now, as with Beyoncé Knowles with Sasha Fierce and Mariah Carey with The Emancipation of Mimi. Pop stars, yes, but I have to wonder why more rock acts haven't adopted this. Over the years, there has been some debate as to whether Sgt. Pepper does in fact qualify as a concept album or not. Some say yes, albeit a loose one. Others say that the concept is too loose and that it only introduces itself at the beginning and then fades away by the 3rd track, only to reintroduce itself at the album's closing. This last analysis is correct, but I would say that Sgt. Pepper is a different kind of concept album. The concept of musical freedom. What happens when a band is freed from having to tour? Freed from the pressure to have to adhere to what is considered commercially viable, or what their audiences feel that they have to be. Track 1, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. When the track opens, we first hear the sounds of band instruments warming up and the sound of audience chatter waiting for an imaginary concert to start. As a kid hearing this album for the first time, the illusion worked perfectly for me. With my headphones on, I really could imagine that I was there at a live concert. From the outset, there is a musical conversation between the rhythm section and the lead guitar, with the rhythm section asking the question and the lead guitar answering. Sgt. Pepper is written in the key of G major, but it opens on in a 7th chord, which creates a slight tension for the first 2 bars. The tension is continued when it jumps to a C7 chord, before it does finally resolve to the G major. It's a completely musical and non-lyrical way of saying, pay attention everybody, something is about to happen. No, not that something. Sorry. That's a video for another day. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but when the guitar, bass, and drums kick in, there is no instant applause from the imaginary audience in attendance. Even when Paul starts to sing It Was 20 Years Ago Today, there is still no applause of recognition for the band. And this is because Paul is only introducing the band. Once he announces the band's name, there is a thunderous applause, and one can imagine the curtain suddenly going up as the band, Sgt. Pepper, and not the Beatles, is revealed to the audience. Now here's the part that tickles me. The original idea for Sgt. Pepper was a military marching band, and upon announcing the name of the band, the first thing we hear is the horns. These would be primary instruments for a military marching band, and this is when the audience starts applauding. This would imply that the rock band at the beginning and Paul's introduction is the Beatles introducing the act you've known for all these years, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In this imaginary scenario, the Pepper Band has been around for 20 years. They are clearly, within the fictional universe of this album, legendary. The announcing of their names elicits thunderous applause that even the Beatles themselves can elicit. Of course, this is all an imaginary scenario in my head, but I think there is a wonderfully delicious comic irony to all of this, that the Beatles are just the backup band for a military marching band, who are bigger stars than them. Now the lyrics tell us who the Sgt. Pepper Band is first with Paul's introduction, and then the band reinforces this when they take the stage. A common motif that I find in hip-hop albums is an opening song wherein the artist tells us, the audience, who they are. This is especially true when it is the artist's first album. And once again, I have always wondered why more rock artists and rock bands don't try the same trick. But the Beatles, to the best of my knowledge, did it first, even if it was for their fictional alter egos. But along with introducing us to the band, the lyrics are also warm and inviting. They put us at ease and tell us to sit back and let the evening go. One of the things I enjoy about this song is the juxtaposition between the guitars and the horns. The horns open with a very classical musical motif and melody, and then the guitars just bang with a heavy, almost metal-style rhythm. Check out the guitar rhythms at the 1 minute and 3 mark for an example of this. There is another sound texture that has always put a big smile on my face, but also always made me wonder too. As the horns begin, there is this burst of audience laughter. I know it's an imaginary audience, but I can't help but wonder, what was so damn funny? What happened on stage that made that audience laugh? For years I've wondered this. Now that I own the Sgt. Pepper Deluxe Edition, I know that Paul was thinking of people like me when he did this. In the enclosed hardcover book, McCartney talks about growing up, listening to comedy shows on the BBC radio, and how there would be moments when the comedian performing said nothing, but that the audience started to laugh at something visual that the comic was doing, and that it would make his imagination run wild, wondering what happened. He mentions that adding the canned laughter was meant to do the same to the audience listening to the album. And in my case, I guess it worked. We are never supposed to know what happened, and that's the point. And it's one of the many little details that just makes me smile when I listen to this album. Track 2, With a Little Help from My Friends. After a little bit of musical vamping, we are introduced to Billy Shears, the alter ego for Ringo Starr, and there is more wild applause and even screaming from the imaginary audience. In the opening lyrics, Billy Shears sings for forgiveness. What would you think if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and I'll try not to sing out of key. There is such a universal sense of earnestness to this lyric. How often have we all wanted to just open up and sing, but we're afraid to because we felt we weren't good enough, or we were afraid of what others might think? Ringo may not be the most technically gifted singer on the planet, but what he might lack in range and chops, he makes up for in personality and earnestness. In fact, from what I've read about the recording of this song, Ringo was hesitant to sing it at first, perhaps concerned that he wouldn't be up to the task. But the other Beatles kept encouraging him, and so life imitated art, and Ringo got by with a little help from his friends, John, Paul, and George, who were kind enough to sing along with him. During the song's pre-chorus, there is this subtle bit of dark tension over a C-sharp minor to an F-sharp 7 chord. This would be the question and answer portion of the song where the band sings, "Do you need anybody?" and Bill answers, "I just need someone to love," which resolves on the much happier E to D to A major chords. Let me emphasize those chords on the piano for you. Tension. Resolve. Tension. Resolve. I do have to pause and wonder on the fact that only Ringo's alter ego gets a name. I think it's too bad that we never got the alter ego names for John, Paul, and George. I think it would have been nice if they had at least been named in the liner notes somewhere, or better yet, why not in the Yellow Submarine movie, since we do get appearances from both the Beatles and their Pepperland alter egos. Now, I realize that this next part is just me way overthinking everything, something I know I'm prone to do, but since the Sgt. Pepper Band in Yellow Submarine play concert band instruments, then perhaps this is an indication that the music from Sgt. Pepper the album is actually coming from the Beatles' alter egos from the Yellow Submarine movie. Now, I realize that the movie Yellow Submarine was created later, and that all of this is impossible since the filmmakers borrowed ideas from the albums to make the film. But I think it's fun to think of it that way, especially if that Yellow Submarine movie sequel that I dreamed about one night ever happens. Yes, I really did once have a dream that I was sitting in a theater and watching an animated sequel to Yellow Submarine. But the Yellow Submarine sequel that I saw in my dream is a video for another day. Now at this point, the concept of the live performance ends, or perhaps just fades into the background, as we no longer hear the audience until the end of side 2. Track 3, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Over the years, many myths regarding this song have come and gone, the most common being that the song was about LSD, and thus the title, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I remember reading an interview with John Lennon in Playboy magazine, one of the last ones he gave before his tragic death, where he stated the song was first inspired by a drawing that his son Julian had created while still in nursery school. John asked him what the drawing was, and Julian replied that it was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Lennon then goes on to state that the rest of the lyrics were inspired from the book Alice in Wonderland. Paul McCartney has also confirmed this as well. But in spite of the song not being about a drug that we all associate with psychedelics, it is interesting to note that the song is inspired by both a child's drawing and a children's book, albeit what some readers, including myself, see as a very psychedelic children's book. Basing the song on a children's book and a child's drawing is reinforced by the very nursery rhyme-like feel to the lyrics. Picture yourself in a boat on a river, with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Somebody calls you, you answer quite slowly, a girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Prior to Ringo's drum cue, the song is performed in 3/4 time or waltz time. For me, this also adds to what I refer to as the whole as seen through the eyes of a child motif that embodies this song. As a child, I can remember being fascinated by a music box that my mother owned. You opened it up and a waltz played while a little mechanical ballerina danced. And so I've always associated the musical motif of a waltz with childhood. The song is written in the key of A major, and it starts with an A major chord. And if you just play the root note and the third note, which is A and C sharp, and then descend the bass line down the scale, you get this. You might be tempted at first to think, oh, okay, it's just an A major chord with a descending bass line. But when you bring the bass line down, it changes the chord voicing so that it is now A major, A over G, F sharp minor 7th, and then what we call F plus. Picture yourself in a boat on a river. Or playing this chord progression gives the musical effect of not so much falling, but drifting away. And this adds to that whole lullaby effect, as if you're drifting off into dreamland. This is all, of course, before Ringo's drum cue, after which the band breaks in, and the song switches to 4/4 time, and it becomes a rock song. The song's chorus, or second half, is in complete opposition to its first half. While the verse is dreamlike and gentle, the chorus is raucous and in your face. The lyrics on the verse are elegant and multi-layered, whereas the chorus is just the song's title repeated over and over. In the stereo mix, John Lennon's vocals are bare at the beginning, but in the mono version, there is a strange bit of phasing effect that adds to the psychedelic feel of the song. Both versions of John Lennon's vocals are enjoyable, but in the new 2017 stereo remix, it sounds like Giles Martin has given us the best of both worlds and has mixed both the phased and bare vocals together. Hi everybody, TJR here. I want to first thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my in-depth analysis of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. If you like this video and you want to see me make more, I really need your support. Please click subscribe, please click like, please leave a comment, and also please share this video on your Twitter, on your Facebook, and any social media you want to share it on. And please do this for any videos that I produce that you enjoy. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.